Hi there everyone, welcome back to Dandelion Delphi Tutorials. Today we're going to look at a harder question. It's question 3 of Final of 2017 and it makes use of two-dimensional arrays with a parallel one-dimensional array running next to it. So for this question we have two arrays. One is a one-dimensional array with 8 items, and then you will see that corresponds with the rows of this two-dimensional array for array sales. And the data here can contain 6 columns, and at some point later in the program we're going to shift these columns to the left and right, the first column to a text file, and then we will add a new week at the end. So this button is asking us to display the two-dimensional array. This is the one-dimensional array and this is the two-dimensional array, but I need you to make a procedure and then make use of the global variable called iStartWeek to display these values here, because later on we're going to write week 1 to a text file and then we will have to display week 2 to 7. Here's an example of the output after the third question, where week 1 was removed and a new week was added here randomly. For displaying the two-dimensional array, you don't need to use iStartWeek. This part here will still be column 1 to 6. So press pause and try it yourself. This here is now my display procedure. I'm clearing my rich edit. The top part here is just creating that first output of the first line of my rich edit. So it starts with department. I'm assigning start week to iWeek because I don't know which week I'm going to start at. Initially it will be week 1, but after question 3 that week will become 2 and 3 and so on, and we need to display that correct number in there. I can't use start week in here because our start week needs to stay at the value that it is, and that's why I assigned it to a new variable that I can change inside of my for loop. You can't use iRow in here because then it will always show week 1 to 6. So this is just building the line and then I'm displaying it in my rich edit. The next part here is just looping row by row. Because we're displaying in a rich edit, we will start with a for loop for the row, adding the name of the department from my one-dimensional array to initialize my output string, and then looping through the columns and just simply adding my sales information in my two-dimensional array. Just make sure to use currency and comma 10, comma 2, and then displaying my output string before I loop again in my for loop for the row. So in button 3.1, I just call my display procedure and you can quickly test your program. So in this button, they're asking us to produce this output. We want to get the average sales figures per week. So remember, the weeks are stored in columns, so you'll start with your for loop for the columns, calculate the average, and then you need to display those departments that were below the average for that week. So this needs to be done all in one set of nested loops. So you are going to display then week 2, the average, and the departments below the average. Press pause and try it yourself. So since the output is at the top of the rich edit, I'm just going to have it out clear, and also remember to add that heading there, underperforming departments per week. And as I said, it's a per column question because we want to know per week what the average is. So I'm starting with my for loop for the columns. I need to initialize the total for each column, so each week will have its own average. So while I am in one column, I am just adding up all the values in all its rows for all the departments for rows 1 to 8 by adding them to my running total, array sales, iRow and iColumn. Outside of this row loop, I'm just using my row total, dividing it by 8 for my 8 rows or my 8 departments to calculate the average. I have stored it here in an array, but there was actually no need to store it as an array. You could just use a variable. And here I am displaying the week, the number, the label average sales figures, as well as then that average that I stored in here. Now I need to loop again. So remember, I'm still, let's say we're looping for the first time, I'm still in week 1. I'm now looping through those values again to determine whether the current value in the two-dimensional array is below the average of that week. Then I will display the name of the department from my one-dimensional array and then the value from the two-dimensional array. As you could see, after every week in the screenshot, you would have an empty line. So I've just done my empty line here to display in the same format as in the screenshot. This is the last button for this question, so press pause and try it yourself. So here's an example of output when this button was clicked first. So the week 1 was written to a text file called week1.txt. All the values were moved 1 to the left and new values were added for week 7, but it is in column 6 of your two-dimensional array. This is what the text file would look like after you click that button. And then if it was clicked again, then this will change to week 3. Week 2 would be written to the text file. And now all of them will move 1 to the left, and this week 8 would be the one with the new values. And here's the example of output for week 2 text file. So since I'm creating a new text file every time, I don't need to test if it exists. I'm not going to add on to one. I'm going to create a new one that is called week and then the start week. So before you increment your start week, make sure you use it to create the name of your text file. I'm going to use a rewrite to create that text file, and now I'm going to loop from 1 to 8 to write all the values in column 1 of each row to the text file in the format, the name of the department, colon, and then the value. Remember to have your close file there, else if you click on this button again, it won't work. Then I have incremented my start week, and now I need to move all my values 1 to the left. So I am starting with my for loop for the columns. I'm moving my columns, so that's why I decided to start at the column for loop. I'm not looping all the way to 6, I'm only looping up to 5. Then for each row, the rows are staying the same. So you'll see here, I row stays the same. I am taking the next column. So if this I col was 1, I'm taking column 2 and I'm placing it over column 1. And I'm looping all the way to 5 so that column 6 will be placed over column 5. So now column 5 and 6 will have the same values, and I simply replace column 6 now here at the bottom with the random values. There were no marks allocated this year for adding the random decimal places, but if you had to do that, this part here is picking a random value from 500 to 5000, the integer part, and then I add to that 2 random decimal values. So the function random will produce random decimal values, and I'm using round 2, -2, to round it off to just 2 decimal values. Remember, round 2, the second argument here says round it off to 10 to the power of that number, so that would be 0.01. And then if I used created my display procedure correctly, I can simply just call it down here. Thank you, grade 12, for watching Dandelion Delphi tutorials. If you want to revise one-dimensional arrays, you need to go to book 2, but book 3 will have more information about two-dimensional arrays. Hope to see you soon.